Charlie, I really appreciate the opportunity to hang out. When you, like I said, when you asked me to do it, I was like, oh, I get to hang out with Charlie. And then I thought, oh, it's a show.
It's a big show. So, I mean, how are things going? I don't know, we're either like 6 months or 20 years into a pandemic, and classes are back on, and you're actually almost to the end of the semester at this point.
Yeah.
You've had your first socially distanced or like fully online concert. How are things going? I mean, is everyone okay? What's up?
We are something like 8 weeks in, I think. So I think we have like 5 weeks left or 6 weeks left of the semester. Like many schools that are going back, we're going to be done right before Thanksgiving. It's been really an interesting journey. And I would say the first 7 weeks have been like a progression or a progressive change for all of us, the students as well as the faculty. Like we were talking about earlier, just learning how to communicate with first of all, a mask on your face, just communicating and being heard, and then the mental and the emotional aspect of what this pandemic is, and that we are singers in a space together, mostly singers, some instrumentalists in a space together, trying to kind of not talk about it, but talk about it because we have to talk about it in order to get over it so that we can get to the music making. Overall, I think the students are doing well. The music has been the primary reason that they came back. I think it was something like 78% of Frost School of Music students chose to come back. And I think it's 75% of the University of Miami students as a whole chose to come back. So that's a pretty big number, and one we certainly couldn't ignore. The students light up when they get the opportunity to sing, and the opportunity to phonate and create at the same time has been really, really fun to watch. A challenge as an educator, but I think we've kind of found a stride, the students and myself. So I'm enjoying it. We did have our first 2 concerts last week. No audience in the room, but live streamed, which was a very unique experience for all of us. It was like almost like producing a television show where we had a little bit of a set, and then we took a break and showed some recordings from concerts and from Jazz Forum. And then, okay, we're back in 30, and then we're back in 5, 4. And the students really, I think they embraced it. I think they had a great time. Standing 10 feet away was not really that big of a deal. It was more having the mask on our face and trying to communicate joy and excitement, enthusiasm and seriousness and emotions. And so much of what we do, is here as vocalists. And to take that information away, it's been a real learning experience. But so I think overall, it's been positive. I'm feeling good about it. It's also, the semester's halfway over. So I may be feeling a little bit like, so that's part of it, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on like hand gestures for that to be like I'm really excited. And then I'm like, I'm kind of sad. I'm sad right now.
It's true. And I think the students did way better than I would, in that situation. I said this to them before the concert. I said, I've realized coming up to the concert week that we are asking these students to do something that I've never done, that most of the teachers have never done, to perform with apparati, whatever, and that far away. So yeah, it's true. You have to get creative, I guess, with your body language and kind of jump up and down or something, but yeah.
Yeah, my subtle like hand in the pocket was not going to like probably communicate that much.
We miss you when we miss that hand in the pocket. Let me tell you. Oh my gosh! But yeah, you're right.
Very laid back. Yeah, that seems like actually a common theme in teaching. I think in the last 10 years, this idea that like, okay, we need to prepare these students to do stuff that like we never had to do, or maybe have never done before. And in this case, like maybe no one has done before. So there's not even like I haven't done this before, but I can read a book about it or something.
Right.
It's interesting. I wonder if that's the new normal. Like there's this new technology, or there's this new crisis or something, or, I mean, how is teaching at a college changed for you in the time that you've been teaching? Are there any kind of like things that strike you, besides maybe even just like besides the end of last spring and then into this fall, even before that?
Certainly just the use of technology and how important that has become in all of what we do. As a faculty member, needing to know more about recording techniques and sound, and there's just more, I think, on the faculty member since I started teaching, to be more informed. And if you don't know what it is, where to get it, and oftentimes it comes with a price tag, and then being very, very forward thinking, or just being on top of that, to be thinking, what am I going to need? What are the changes that are coming? For sure. I think, the students, that's probably the biggest difference in the students, and how much information is being put to them on a daily basis, because of the black boxes that we carry in our pockets and stuff. And I think since I started teaching, I got my first full-time gig in 2002. So yeah, I mean, everybody had cell phones, but it just feels like the consumption of information wasn't anywhere near like it is now, for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the current situation we're in right now, environmentally, politically, and medically, we're just in a whole different space for sure. But just the consumption, the wanting to consume information, I think is a lot different for all of us, teachers, but also students. Yeah, that's kind of it. I think too, for me, it's a shift from going from a community college in California to a private university in Florida. There's, I don't want to say it's night and day, but there's just certain philosophical approaches to education that are really obviously have a lot of difference. So therefore, the community that I'm teaching is very different. But
so you've gone, like me, you've gone to school a lot for music. So like nine years or something like that. Somewhere close to that.
Yeah.
So how do you see just the part of just the role of being a musician, a student musician, or a student of vocal jazz, or a student of voice? Like, how is your experience? How do you see your experience as a student being different than the students of today?
More and more, it feels like another dimension almost. It just, the students are so much more sophisticated, largely in part to what we just talked about with information and the consumption of information, and just the way we receive, the way we listen to music, the way we share music. So that is kind of like the starter of it all. And to be really super basic, I mean, when I was in school, you were either an education major or a performance major. There wasn't a lot of options where I went to school. At least if there were, I wasn't made known to me, or I didn't search those things out. I knew that it was teaching or it was performance, and I kind of toggled between the two and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And it didn't feel like there was a lot of intersection between those two things, or that they didn't cross so much, that if you're a performer, that's it. You're going full on performer. Nobody really talked about teaching. I don't remember at that point either a lot of quote unquote, I'll use the word famous, or let's just say established musicians weren't teaching then. I remember Billy Hart. I was at Western Michigan University, and Billy Hart, the great drummer Billy Hart, became an artist in residence. That's the first time I'd ever experienced somebody that, of such great magnitude of musicianship and career coming to teach. And it was a rather big deal. And I think it shuffled things quite a bit, not only in my mind, but for somebody like him as well, that we are bringing people who perhaps don't have plaques on the walls with certificates in them or whatever to be instructors. So things were just very, very different. And now I think most universities, a lot more universities and colleges are embracing artists that, again, perhaps did not go through some kind of structured academic situation and under the fluorescent lighting, but more and more artists are becoming educators. I should say they probably always have been educators, but we're inviting them into the academia and into the structured environment of a school setting. And so there's much more connection to, and I don't love this word, I mean, if I can find another word, real world is the thing that everybody uses, but there's more connection to what life is like as a professional musician today. And that just wasn't as accessible to us as we were in school. Yeah, the intersectionality as well. If you're a performer, you're likely going to be teaching something. And if you're a teacher, there's more endorsing of being a performer as well, specifically in the jazz department or jazz realm, I think. Mm-hmm. If you're a pedagogue, you play. And if you end up teaching, you're going to be a monster player as well. Most of the people, undergraduates in our school, are already teaching at various student programs and after-school programs throughout Miami, and that just wasn't part of really the conversation when I was in school. So I think it's kind of a beautiful thing. It's elevated everybody in a different way. You get better at what you do when you teach it. So even undergraduate students that are sharing their knowledge with 8-year-olds or 6-year-olds, 14-year-olds, there's something that they're gaining by sharing that knowledge. So yeah, like I said, it feels somewhat other dimensional, but at the same time, I think it's been really fantastic to watch that shift, and also terrifying for me to a certain extent, because I feel like my friends that were all at these universities were kind of those people now, and that feels really strange to be those people. I'm used to looking up to those people. Those are the people. I'm not suggesting that people are looking up to me or to my friends, but in positions of authority, you tend to be put in that place of they're there or what have you. So I hope it makes sense. But
yeah, well, I mean, if you won't say people are looking up for you, I will just say it. That I think you're in very kind of rare company of that group, for vocal jazz, but I think just for educators and for jazz educators, that like people are really looking to, for, I mean, just the amount of festivals and clinics and those kind of things that you do. I think like you've beyond the University of Miami, you are really plugged in to kind of like the whole system. I wonder, something you had just mentioned about kind of the options that you had for degrees when you were in school, and then kind of like the kind of more of the spectrum that exists in all of these kind of things where it's like jazz education, jazz writing, jazz performance, contemporary music, contemporary writing, recording technology, music business, music ed, classical performance, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if, because I feel like there are two kinds of like forces that are in opposition in this idea, where it's like, to be a musician in the 21st century, it maybe means being more of a generalist and being able to do a bunch of different kinds of things, and not really knowing, like from my personal experience, like not knowing what you're going to be into in like 5 years or 10 years, or not knowing what you're going to need to be able to do, versus having really specific degrees, like having them named really specific things, and having, at some schools, not all, but at some schools having like very discrete silos for each of those things, where it's like you spend a lot of time doing like just music business or just classical violin or something, and not kind of like, my thought was always that like, this is what, from almost a marketing or an admissions point of view, like students really want their degree to like say something, to like have they maybe don't want it to just be like, I have a music degree. They want to say like, I have a bachelor's degree in blah, 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 in blah, 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 with a minor in blah, blah, blah. Cause it like the more words on a LinkedIn profile or resume or something. I mean, how do you see this? And this is something that's changed even since I went to school but I don't know how much it had changed in the 100 years before that or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's been a lot of changes too with like jazz programs, like jazz being a degree, jazz being something you could get a doctorate in, like this. So, I mean, how do you see that maybe, first of all, do you agree with the premise of this question, if it is a question? And then also like, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I do agree. I completely agree. There's almost much more specificity. At the same time, there is freedom in a lot of these university programs and college programs. And like you said, the list goes on and on and on and on. And the fact that doctoral degrees are available in certainly jazz now, and we're going to see that happen, I think, in contemporary programs as those continue to build, and which is really, really great. At the same time, these institutions are making more available the opportunity for students to pick and choose what they want to do within that curriculum, where their focus lies, whether it be an instrumental thing or a vocal thing, or it's a songwriting thing, or it's a producing hat they're interested in wearing. So it's really unbelievable. I think as we continue on, I think we're going to see, again, more and more possibilities within other kinds of other genres. I think that those other genres are going to come to the academic situation and even be more prominent, and those areas will be more defined. I think there will be less, I guess the buzzword in academia now is silos. I think there will be less silos. I think there could be a removal of specific kinds of music as the detail, the descriptor of the degree. It might be going back to more of a performance aspect as opposed to a production aspect, or an education aspect, which is exciting to me. I think so much categorization has happened to music, and I don't think that that's benefited anybody. Who listens to this music? Who makes this music? Where does this music come from? Well, that's the only person or the only people that should perform it. We don't necessarily benefit from those kinds of things. At the same time, it's very important to understand where it does come from in the history of what it is we're doing. But I just feel that with the rise of technology and programs wanting to be all things, we're just going to see more and more options in academia. And like I said, I think contemporary programs are going to start getting the footing that jazz programs did back in like the 70s and maybe even like, I guess you can go back as far as the 60s. I remember going into school, coming back for a doctorate, and I was on a session in Miami, and the producer came over on the talkback and said, "So you're getting a doctorate in jazz performance? Like, why? Like, A, who needs more people with that? And B, what purpose does that serve? Like, that's not where you learn," it was basically the gist of what he was going for. And I didn't really, obviously wasn't the time or place to have kind of a discussion about that, but it really made me think, because here's a very well-known producer. I mean, just really very, the resume, the CV is huge with all the credits and the famous people that he had produced and played for and written for. And I probably was hurt at the time, but I took it to heart. I think that there's the idea that we are kind of stuck in one thing. We have to move away from that, I think, in education, and opening up our eyes as faculty at what's possible, and combining genre. I think we're going to get beyond genre very soon. I hope we do. I think there are some amazing things happening today in music that really have started us thinking that way. And I think lots of schools are trying to bring those people in as guest artists. So I hope I see that. I really do. I hope I see that in my career, where we perhaps aren't so siloed with classical performance, jazz performance, contemporary. What if it's just music? And the other school of thought too is kind of breaking up the whole system again of majors. Again, you get the performance experience, or you get the education experience, or you get the pedagogy experience of let's say Dr. Daversa, and you get to spend time with him in the classes that he teaches. They happen to be some jazz classes, but I don't know that Dr. Daversa would really have to define his classes with a genre. I think he could teach any student the concepts that he wants to convey with whatever music they want to be creating. But what if schools were set up that way, where you get a Kate Reid experience, and you get an Alison Wenny, you get a Charlie Christensen, you get a Christine Guter, you get an Alan Baylock, you just get their perspective, which isn't right or wrong, it's their perspective. That combined with no genre siloing, I don't know, that sounds kind of exciting to me. Maybe it's crazy, but that sounds exciting to me.
Maybe in like 100 years, yeah. The way,
yeah. Point well taken.
But I mean, who knows? Who knows though? I think like this is I sometimes cringe when people say, you know, there's opportunity in crisis, but because I think you have to take a beat or a moment to acknowledge like the pain that, you know, like it's not to say it as opportunity sometimes makes it seem like people are like stoked about it or something.
Right.
But I think, you know, there could be some opportunity for some of these things. I mean, that's kind of what you're describing is something I've been very, you know, interested in and thinking about. And I kind of felt like maybe there was a change that was going to have to come at some point, you know, just with, I mean, even before the pandemic, you know, budgets and all of these kinds of things, and the way that especially America looks at education and how they see it, and just seeing like, well, this is maybe not sustainable in its current form. Maybe there is opportunity for some other ways to structure this, you know, keep all the things that are really vibrant and good about this and kind of multiply them or something, you know. I'm wondering about when you were making this decision. So when you were an undergrad, you were a music ed major technically, or a performance major?
I was an ed major for 2 years. Yeah, I was an ed major for 2 years. I transferred into Western from a small school in Ohio. It was a liberal arts college, and I was an ed major there, and then transferred to Western in my sophomore year and stayed as an ed major, and then realized very quickly I was spending time doing things I really wasn't passionate about at that level, and then changed my major to jazz studies. Vividly remember saying to my mom and dad on the phone, I just changed my major to jazz studies, to silence on the other end. Of course, I was, you know, my mother was a teacher, and my dad, some would also say that he's a teacher as well, as he was a pastor and whatnot. And they were just, what are you going to do with that? My answer was, go to grad school. But yeah, I was an ed major, and I just did not find those were my people, I think, at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I had a similar thing. I mean, I did an ed major in undergrad, and like, I think once I was doing my student teaching, I realized that like choral music in particular, I mean, the general music thing was actually, I was more kind of excited about that, but like and I love singing in choirs, but I realized that to be really, really good at being a choral director, you need to really love that music to the point where you're like kind of listening to it at night, you know, like sitting with some bourbon and like listening to like Palestrina or something, you know, or whatever that kind of thing is. And it was just like, I like this, but not like that. The thing I actually like is this, you know, the other thing I was doing, you know, which is what I still do. But so already by like your junior year of undergrad, you knew that like you wanted to go to grad school. Like, did you go right into your master's degree, or did you like have a little gap?
I had a little gap. I probably would have gone straight through had an assistantship been available.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It started with Jennifer Shelton at the time. She was kind of the first connection from Western to University of Miami. And she had the assistantship, that of course was 2 years for the master's. And Greg Jaspers and I graduated at the same time, and we both wanted to go, and there weren't assistantships available. And Larry Lappin said, if you guys wait, he said, wait a year and we can make this happen. So we did. So I took 2 years off, I guess, technically speaking, right? Yeah, 2 years off between the undergrad. I had taken some graduate courses at Western. I kind of thought that I was going to do my master's at WMU, but the idea that Miami was kind of pulling and Jennifer was doing it, I thought, well, she's doing it. There must be some good stuff down there. Of course, we had seen them at they were IAJEs at the time, International Association of Jazz Educators conferences, and it was always, what's Miami doing? And I remember being in Miami for the IAJE, and JV1 sang this really hip arrangement of Quincy Jones' Back on the Block, and we were all like, what? Like, that was so cutting edge, it was so happening at the moment, like that mm-hmm. just came out. It wasn't a song that was 4 years old, or 20, 40, 50, 60 years old. So yeah, I knew that I was going to get exposed to some other things down there, and I knew that the areas, the holes in my own aural experience and sonic models. So yeah, waited a little bit and came down with Greg.
So like at that time, were you thinking like, okay, a master's degree is like something I need to get to, like, I need that kind of stamp of approval to go do a thing? Or was it more about like, I want to study here? Or was it like, I think like, so if you're 22, I mean, I remember that feeling of just kind of like, it was more of an energy or something where it was just kind of like, yeah, I want to go to grad school. Like, that sounds really cool. I want to do that thing. How much thought went into it? Not to like call you out or something about like, did you make a weird rash decision? But like,
yeah,
like, was it more of just kind of an intuition thing, or did you have an expectation of like what you would get out of going to grad school?
That's a really great question. I think it was more about my next step musically than it was what I was going to get from having that degree. I think it was more, I'm not really done here. And I felt like I had spent, 2 years doing other things, and then somehow I was able to graduate, thankfully, with a jazz studies degree, changing my major in my junior year, or maybe the middle of my sophomore year. And I just felt like I had more to gain, and I wanted to be around really great players. And I think Jen kind of opened that door, exposing us more so than I'm going to have a master's degree and I will be employable. Yeah, I didn't really think about it in that way. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I thought, this is cool. I want to do this. So it was more the desire to express and keep refining skills. Yeah.
Did you have an idea at that time that you would maybe want to teach at a college, or?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I knew pretty early on, because in the Gold Company program, Doctor's Degrees structure was that the students are very much hands-on, and there was a section leader assigned, and that section leader had sectionals 3 days a week, and that section leader was responsible to make sure that that section knew the music and was prepared, and there was a lot of responsibility, and I think I fell into that pretty comfortably, and I loved that process. And I think, yes, I knew that education and teaching was ultimately going to be the next step. And then when I got down to Miami for my master's, the TA, as you know, is pretty wide open in that you get to teach a lot of things. Perhaps you're made to teach a lot of things. And I don't know, I felt like I really got the opportunity to kind of begin kind of building or honing a style of teaching. I had just come off the Zagree thing and the Gold Company thing and came down to Miami, where Larry Lappin, personally is probably a good 180 in terms of the vibe and the energy and the way he taught. not certainly in the expectation of excellence, but just in his process and whatnot. So getting all these different kind of philosophies and ways of doing things and ways of motivating people and exciting people and inspiring. So I started to develop my own kind of sense of who I was going to be or wanted to be as an educator. And I think it was during the master's that I started to really, have my own studio of students. I had like 5 voice students, not that I really should have at that time, but I had them and was really enjoying that collaborative thing and watching people get better at stuff. So it probably started mostly in my master's that I said, yeah, this whole teaching thing's kind of cool. I'm getting better at my skill set because I'm able to share this with these people. Yeah.
I'm going to make like a very subtle pivot to, to kind of maybe some more artistic, kind of more of an artistic line of questioning, or, as opposed to teaching, I guess. I'm kind of interested in these like 2 kind of like initial flashpoints or something for musicians. It's just kind of like, what was the thing that happened? Was there a moment or a time in your life or something like that like sparked this idea that like, I want to be a musician, like full stop, period? Like, not like, I like music, I want to play some music or whatever, or like, I want to be in a band because it'll be fun, I'll go to parties, but like, I want to be a musician. And then the other thing about that, the other part of that question that I'm kind of interested in is like, who was like the earliest person you remember like emulating, like for real, like deeply, like that, like it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to sing this one song like Stevie Wonder or something, like try to do an impression, but like that you felt like you were like hugging for a really like an awkward long period of time, and you like were almost kind of becoming them in some ways, like, so what's that first kind of like big flashpoint? And then like, who is the person that it was, if there was one? I kind of assume for most people there is like at least one, model.
For sure. The flashpoint, or that moment of this is something I really want to do, was really early for me. It sounds weird. I would say that it probably started in high school. I think I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of music in high school, instrumental and vocal. And I found myself, at every study hall during high school, in the band room or in the choir room. And of course, doing all the musicals and just everything from jazz band to marching band to symphonic band to show choir to chorale to all the things. So it really started early on. I couldn't really imagine myself doing anything else, but I also thought that teaching was part of it even back then, because I really respected the people that I was learning under or getting fed by. All of the teachers that I had were just such unique mentors in my life, and also made just big imprints at a very early age. And I think I looked up to them a great deal. But when I changed my major to jazz studies, it certainly had something to do with the fact that I was in this program at Western that was just nothing like I'd ever seen or experienced before. And that we could do this and you could actually major in this. That's really nuts. And the artist who I to this day probably can sing, I don't know, 3 or 4 records along with, and not miss many eighth notes, would have to be Sarah Vaughan. Not in tone, really, I don't think. I mean, yes, she has a low instrument, but, and of course, obviously there's different stages, but just the mastery of her phrasing and the fact that she was an instrumentalist as well. She played great piano, which I didn't really get hip to till much later, but obviously was really influencing a lot of her musical choices and the way she ran her bands. But one specific record, and I might have said this to you before, but it's the record "How Long Has This Been Going On?" Joe Pass, Ray Brown, Willie Belson.
Yeah,
just masterful to me. That was a big pivotal moment of the lyric. Is wow, it doesn't have to just be this. It's what she's feeling right there, and I really felt a sense of connection with how she was playing with time and so in control of the time, and the way the instrumentals played with her. I said, I want to feel that. That's what I want to feel. Yeah, it was definitely her for sure.
Was that an album that you kind of like came upon organically, or was there somebody that was like, here? Was it like they opened up there was like a gold chest and like the rays of light were like floating out of it?
I think that it was, I think it was a random thing that I got that record. I don't even remember how I obtained it. I do know that I remember going to the Meijer grocery store in Kalamazoo, Michigan later. Meijer had everything from like snow tires to celery. So it had they call them super stores now, right? But Meijer, nobody had heard this before. Like you could do anything at Meijer. And then they had these records, these albums, these LPs, and it was like all of her Pablo recordings on the Pablo label, and it was kind of all that same time period. Like I said, I don't even know where I got it. I think somebody must have played it for me, or I heard it somehow. My brother could have handed it to me. That's a great question. I should find that out. It's a good question.
Well, it's always fascinating to me, these like those serendipitous, like random moments that it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Someone gave me like a box of used tapes or something, and then like the first tape on top became my whole life, or etc. or whatever. And that's not my personal story. I don't want to pretend, but just a version of that story.
Right.
So you've been, that I had a question too about. I don't even know, and you can correct me. I don't even know if this is like if this is actually a real question, but it will be real words, I promise. But when you're approaching a song, when you're going to perform a song, when you're working on a song, when you're in the moment singing a song, what's like the number one element in your head? Is it lyrics? Is it music? Is it etc.? There's probably a bunch of things you could be thinking about. Is it like what you're going to have for lunch or whatever? That's probably my default. No.
Lunch is always on the table.
What kind of burrito will it be today? Exactly. That's mine. So the first part of it, is that even like is that a legitimate question? Is that actually how it works in your head? And if so, like what's the priority for you?
It's such a good question, and I think one that I pose to my students, and we all do. I think, what is your intention? What is your purpose? Why are you singing this song? What's this song mean? So choosing literature, it's like this great mix of harmony, melody, and rhythm has to come together that just kind of captivates me. How does the lyric connect to all three of those things? And am I moved by it? Do I want to tell that story? Do I think I can tell that story? Am I willing to go on the journey that it will take to tell that story? But when I'm in the moment singing a tune, after I've decided that this is the journey I want to take, it's definitely a lyric for me. And if there's no lyric, it would be the intention of the composer with regard to melody and harmony and rhythm, and how do those three intersect? What is my role? What is my function? But when there is a lyric, it certainly is, the lyric is paramount. Yeah, and I think I don't know, I think that I have relationships with my tunes that I choose. That sounds so weird. I realize it sounds more natural when people say I have relationships with my compositions. Relationship sounds a little bit bizarre, but I have a connection too. How's that? That doesn't sound as strange. Even though I don't call myself a composer. I've written very, very few things. It's not a gift that I have worked, or a muscle that I have worked. And so for me, it's taking somebody else's material and making it my own, or trying to convey it in a way that is authentic. I think authenticity and natural energy and making it something special and not just regurgitating what's there is really, really important. And it's been fun because that's been a journey too, a change. I think, obviously age on one side helps helps with those kinds of things. But I remember my teacher, Sonny Wilkinson at Western, talking about the lyric, and I just didn't get it. I just didn't really get it. So I think it's changed throughout the time, obviously, when you start as a musician. And first, the lyric is a way to get the sound out, so I can get that melody in the right place at the right time. But when you get the opportunity to be aware and you determine that you understand, or your brain is capable of focusing on the lyric because you have all the other things together, that's such a freeing thing. And watching students get to that point is just, it's unbelievably satisfying and rewarding and exciting. That was a lot of information about one question. So I would say to answer the short question, for me it's a lyric. It's telling that story. And can I do it? Can I do it authentically? And should I be telling that story? Leads to some other.
Yeah. Story. I mean, one of the interesting ideas in your response is that, this approach has changed over time and that there is a maturity to it. I wonder almost if it's like this, athletes will talk about how the game kind of slows down eventually, like at first when they're a rookie or something, or when they first start playing, that everything just moves so fast. It's almost like you don't even see things happening. Yeah. And then once someone has played for a while, or if they just have a kind of brain that can kind of see it at a different speed, I wonder if because I've had a similar experience, where I think at first it was just almost so much information. Like there's so many things happening that lyrics were not in my brain a lot of the times when I was singing a song. Like I was trying to memorize the lyrics and not say the wrong word or just blank. That was that was almost as far as I went, especially late teens, early 20s, that kind of thing. And then once you, like you said, get to know a song, like really live in a song for a while, but also like once the musical things feel like they're not coming at you so fast, or that you have more like reign of your horses or something like that, you can maybe spend more time in that space or something. I don't know. I wonder if it is something that if you just focus on it, you get better at that faster or something. If you have somebody giving you that advice or that experience, or if it's just a matter of like, you just need to play a certain number of games or something and things slow down. But I think that is a really interesting, maybe kind of like way to think about it, or just something at least for me to think about when it comes to that kind of thing. I think at least recently you've been playing a lot of duo. That at least your last record was a duo album, and what I'd seen you play around town and stuff for the last couple of years, that it kind of seemed to be the ensemble of choice. And I wonder if, like, for you, if first of all, like, what's been like, why have you kind of like been leaning into that configuration? Like, what's cool about it? And then, is that something you see kind of going in the future as being still the thing, or are there other configurations coming, I guess, down the pipe?
There's something about the role of the players, and I mean, when I say players, I mean vocalists is one of those people, but it feels to me like the more people you have in an ensemble, the less responsibility there is on each individual to a certain extent. And when you start limiting or eliminating people from that ensemble, the role of those people gets a little bit more intense. They take on more things to do. And then you bring it down to two people. It's just, I don't know, there's something about that that's really exciting to me, that I have more jobs to do. I have more things that I can contribute to. I can make change to the sonic texture in an instant, which sounds like a control problem that I have, but there's something very exciting about that idea of listening to somebody else, them listening to you, and obviously the cliche thing to say is, well, it's a conversation, and it is definitely a conversation, but it's more of a, what can we do together? And with only two of us, we can do, my options are a lot more open, and I can try things. I also think there's something about the duo situation when you've got somebody that is really comfortable with space, depending on who you're playing with. Comfortable with space, likes space, makes space part of the sound, and of course understands if there is a lyric that story is the focus of whatever we're in support of. I guess we're all in support of that story. So I started doing the duo thing. I had been doing it ever since I was in high school. I mean, it's not obviously a new thing, but my brother's a good jazz guitarist, so we did a lot of playing together, and I was just always into it. And of course, you play with the same person all the time. They know your habits, they know your weaknesses or whatever. They're going to fill in the gaps. To a certain extent, it might be considered easy, right? Because, well, if you keep playing duos with people and they know you, then they're going to fill in those gaps and or make you rise to other things, which is what I'm really into, playing with amazing players who challenge me in so many different ways, either harmonically, melodically, or rhythmically, and challenge me to come up with different things that I can add to the role that I'm playing in this duo situation. So I'm kind of addicted to that feeling of meeting somebody for the first time musically. I cannot wait to experience somebody musically. And you only get to do that one time. And there's just something really neat about that. And then the idea that if I do this, they might do this, or they might do these other 5 things, but I don't know what they're going to do. That is really fun for me. I don't know why I am into that so much, but I think a lot of people are. I think when you're in a larger situation or larger ensemble situation, and if you're, like the Jazz Messengers, I think that's a very different situation than it is with somebody that hasn't been playing together for 30 years or what have you. You definitely have to feel like you're either giving the information orally or the information's on the page, or you're so confident that you know that your body language and whatever you're doing vocally or in your horn or your guitar or your piano is going to let everybody else know what's happening. So I think to a certain extent, there's an element of comfortability in just one, and then to another extent, I think it's a tightrope that I really like. So I guess both sides of that for me. From a standpoint of a record, it was something I wanted to do because, again, I'm really addicted to that feeling of one person and conversing and then trying things. And then from literally a business standpoint, it was easier to do concerts around the country when I was only having one other person with me. So from a financial standpoint, it just made a lot of sense at that time for that specific record. And then in talking about it with Peter, who produced it, Peter Eldridge, he was into putting me with people that I didn't know and also having me sing literature or material that I would not normally choose. And that in a duo situation, he was like super into it. And it was terrifying. For some of those, a couple of those selections. That's a lot of information that does not really answer your question, but.
Oh no, I think it does. I mean, so for future projects and work, assuming that the human race does not go extinct and we are able to, we're playing more concerts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, is that something you see yourself doing? Do you ever see yourself kind of doing do you have dreams of doing other ensembles? I imagine probably, just for the sake of trying new things.
Absolutely true. Yeah. Definitely interested in kind of stretching outside the jazz standard bag right now. And doing so with more voices is kind of something that I would like to spend more time singing with other vocalists. And creating some stuff that way, with a rhythm section, or I don't know. As soon as you say rhythm section, it seems like it goes into a specific genre. But instrumentalists and vocalists, I don't know what that looks like, and that goes back to the whole genre thing. I'd really like to just record a bunch of songs that I like, and reimagine things in ways, or tunes that lots of people know in different ways, or tunes that nobody knows by my friends and my peers and the musicians that I admire. And therefore, I think it's going to be kind of it's going to be difficult to kind of categorize it. And that seems to be what's necessary these days. Again, categorizing things. But yeah, I'm interested in using my voice in other ways, not just to deliver a lyrical story right now, a text story, but playing around with sound and timbre and even processing of the voice and experiencing other rhythmic kinds of things and concepts, and with other vocalists. That's kind of been driving a lot of my listening lately, and just listening to people like Peter and Lauren and Lila Bialy and Charlie Christensen, and I don't know if you've ever heard of him before, but just getting other ideas of different things. And still, it's like the back pocket, having the jazz stuff back. I hate to use that word, but the format that's so comfortable with one other human being. Having that conversation feels like a very nice warm sweater. Going back to that.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
I thought I would just, read this quote, and then I think it'd be nice to have a conversation about basically misogyny in jazz, which has been a huge problem, and I think forever, but has been more recently, maybe within the last 2 years or so, has really been addressed more than it has ever been, and it's been talked about a lot more. But there's still a long ways to go to kind of fix these systemic problems, But that I think this quote kind of like lays kind of like the situation out well, much more eloquently than I would be able to do. The male jazz musician accepts and takes for granted that at every step he'll be dealing with other men, from club owners to booking agents to band leaders, fellow players, reviewers, and writers in the press, a male-dominated profession. The language that describes jazz and jazz musicians reflects this reality. The actor in this world of music is with good reason commonly called the jazz man. What has your experience been like in these terms? Like what has the situation been? What's the situation now? And kind of like, how do we move forward? Like what needs to happen, basically?
Yeah, it's an important question. I'm glad that you're asking it. I like that quote quite a bit. I'll probably get that from you at some point afterwards. The quote sets it up so well. It is just ingrained so deeply that this is this art form is put together by the jazz guys. It's made by the jazz men. You're a jazz man. You're a side man. There's just so many terms that just constantly indicate that it's the assumption that it's always going to be a male first, or that the likelihood that it's a male that's going to be doing it. If it's a singer, that it's likely going to be a female. That is something that, until we start putting women in leadership positions, band leader positions, leadership positions at universities, in chairing jazz departments across the country, in dean positions, and also training our faculty, I think, across, I would say, the globe. I don't think this is just a United States issue. I think it's inherent to the music itself, which is really what that author is saying. It's changed over the last few years for me, I would say. I got to this position in 2013, and I think overwhelmingly there is an attempt of awareness, an attempt of inclusion, and I think the soul and the spirit of all of my colleagues is very honest, pure, and positive. I think, as you said, the systemic things that are just so ingrained, however, are they're just still there, and they're going to be there until we are faced with looking at these things via discussion and making it okay for a female, whether it's jazz department or not, anywhere in the School of Music, female to say, hey, you said that thing, I really wish you hadn't, or that might not have been the best way. And until women are feeling comfortable with bringing those things up and not being kind of targeted after that, then we're still going to have this issue. We've had this discussion in the jazz department at the Frost School. We've had some from some very real and healthy talks about getting training for racial bias and gender bias and sexual harassment. And then it comes into question every time we're in a recruiting cycle, which is we're always recruiting. We've talked about having blind auditions. Maybe it's time to move to that, like the military does, right? Or the Met or whomever, the Philharmonics of the world. It might be time to move to that until we perhaps get a new generation of educators through too. It's hard to just let it go, let any kind of transgressions or missteps, let's say, when somebody's been in place for 30, 25 years and, well, they're going to be gone soon. So we just let it roll and it'll be okay. It's just old school, all those terms that we hear so often. And I say we, meaning not just the institution where I am at, but the institution where I was before, an institution where I was at school before, as a student. We just can no longer allow. We can't complain about what we allow. And I think there are steps happening currently at the place where I am at the Frost School that we're taking with students and with faculty and having discussions about kind of knee-jerk reactions and avoiding the stereotypes and the whys and the wheres of vocalists being over here and musicians over there, or those kinds of comments, as well as gender roles and gender issues. And the thing is, it trickles down, obviously, and it trickles down to the student population, and the students feel it, and then their behavior is affected by it, and then they continue on those same issues. They continue behaving in those same ways, both sides of that, female and male. Yeah, and I'm comfortable to say there's been a couple of times that things have happened and or things have been said and I didn't speak up. I was the only female on the faculty and I didn't speak up. It was like my first week on the job and something was said and I really should have said something that was uncomfortable, and instead somebody else said something lighthearted to just change the subject and pivot us to something else. And that is something I have regretted for a very long time. And I feel like I let down the legions of jazz vocal females behind me that I should have said something. And so a couple of things that we can do and need to do is take those moments and just speak up. And when we feel we can, we do, no matter the consequences. And especially those of us who are a little bit older and aren't student age anymore. We need to speak up and support. It's definitely part of the conversation, much more than it used to be, for sure. I think it's going to take a long time. Not to be a pessimist, I do think it's going to take a while for this shift to be. This won't even be a discussion anymore. I think that's going to be a while. I think we'll be having these discussions, but I think training and education and just in the similar ways that I think we need to be trained for trans students to be coming into our classrooms and how we speak to our gendered students and how they want to be referred to, and getting out of saying the men and the women and speaking using the terms that they would like to be referred to. That shift needs to happen as well, and it's making it part of our consciousness and being very aware. And you mentioned festivals and whatnot that I've been doing. I think that's really helped in that area as well, me being aware of just diverse communities. and 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 being in a leadership role in directing, communicating, interacting with diverse communities. It's really, really important. Yeah, we are in the process of obtaining, procuring some outside consulting for the Frost School with regard to these issues. And I think now's the time. I think the time's ticking. We are here. And I know that the female students across the entire School of Music are very vocal, and the students are speaking up, and it's great. It's really, really, really great to see and to be witnessed to this change. I saw a meme, and I posted it not long ago. It said, if you're over 45 and you don't have a mentor under the age of 30, you're missing the conversation right now. I thought, that's good. I like that a lot. I think that's really true. I would probably change that to more like under 25, but my mentees or my mentors. So I've got a lot of mentors. So
like someone with a TikTok account, like that's the
exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting time. I'm really glad you asked the question. And when I read the question earlier today, I was like, oh, it's kind of loaded. It's a little bit of a loaded question, but I really feel that the conversation can happen. And I really feel the people that I'm around on a regular basis want to do better, want to communicate better, want to learn how to convey, want to be treating their students and their colleagues in appropriate ways. We just can't teach anymore like we were taught. That's kind of one of my biggest shifts or biggest things that I've learned recently, that I cannot teach the way I was taught anymore with regard to jazz and its history and race, as well as the way I probably have spoken to students upon occasion by the examples that were set for me when I was a student. I have to shift. I have to change. And I want to shift and want to change because stagnance is not an option, because that means every part of me is stagnant, I think. So that's kind of, again, that's a roundabout, it sounds like a Miss America answer. I hope it doesn't sound nothing wrong with Miss America, by the way. Yeah. To all the Miss America pageant people in the world, I'm sorry.
Don't sue us. I mean, it's kind of, I feel a similar sort of pang when you were saying that, there were moments when something was said in a room and you felt like it was your responsibility to speak up and you didn't. And I feel a similar pang because I actually think it's the responsibility of people that look like me to say something when meaning a white man. And
sure.
I think as a hopefully trying to be a thoughtful person and liberal and open to these ideas, I think a lot of times it's easy to say well, I'm not being misogynist right now, or I'm not being racist right now. So I'm not part of the problem. Right. I will be a shoulder to cry on or something like that. But it's actually probably the way that, talking about change happening really slow, the way that change happens faster and better, I think, and it will be more solid and actually the responsibility is on the people's shoulders that it should be on, actually, is that if people like me speak up in those scenarios. And I think that's something that I've learned more recently than I am proud to say, that I wish I, had been doing that, but sooner. But, there have been moments where people have said things in a room or I could, you could just kind of tell decisions were being made based on something that they shouldn't be made on. And because it's not something I said, or because it's not because a decision I made, it's kind of like, well, out of my hands, like, but I think, I've learned a lot about that too. And I kind of wanted to just add that to your, to this conversation, just so that people that look like me know that it's their responsibility to speak up. And it can't just be, the female musician's job to like make us males better. I think that's it's time for that to end.
Yes, agreed.
But yeah, I also agree, and I just want to trumpet the thing you said about having more female leadership at every level. I think a lot of times it seems like the response or the solution is to like, we're going to hire more like female adjuncts or something, or like we're going to hire more female like assistant or associate professors or something. You know what I mean? And it's like, who are you promoting in the organization, all that kind of stuff. But then there's the performance side of it. So like, I know that you've had experiences with like male promoters or club owners, or, like part of the idea is that all that stuff has maybe gone away right now because nobody's playing shows, at least in the US. So it's like, is there hope? Is there a way for us to build that whole pipeline back in a better way that doesn't have, there's probably a lot of solutions that would be nice, or there would be a lot of problems that'd be nice to solve by like rebuilding, that infrastructure. But, is there any advice you would give yourself now, like when you were coming up and playing shows, like do this, say this, don't, whatever, does anything come to mind? I know you weren't like really prepped for this question specifically, but like, does anything like pop into your head?
Yeah. I would probably tell my 20-some-year-old self or whatever, that your feeling of inferiority or inferiority is your own, and that doesn't define you as a person. It doesn't define you as a musician. That your self-deprecating and your humbleness and the intention to always serve the music, and put yourself last. That's the thing we were taught all the time, right? That the music is more important and you are the vessel for the music. And this is all very true, but there is an element of confidence and competence that comes with that, and that has to be embraced and needs to be embraced in a healthy way. And I would probably tell myself there will be times to speak up and to stand for yourself. And when those times come, take your moment. And with that respectful, humble self, speak with the music as the focus, but speak for what you need. That's probably what I would say to myself. And I guess to backtrack, that is always, well, I probably did something. That was my, I probably didn't do the right thing, or I didn't say the right, or it's probably my fault. Everything is, and I think as a person starting in a couple of different cities in this country and having lived overseas and whatnot, humbleness and being really honest and wanting to come across with the pure heart is important. But I think I would say again that there's got to be a balance, and you've got to maintain the opportunities. You've got to take the opportunities and maintain your own dignity, your own self-respect, and stand up for what you need, what is best, and for the people that are coming behind you. The whole animal of, like you say, club owner or booking manager or whatever. There are a few clubs that are still hanging on, but it will be a different thing now. And certainly the virtual thing has just blown everything kind of out of the water. I wonder how much the interaction will be so closely with artists and booking, people that have booked talent. It'll be very interesting to see how that is. I think that archetype is probably never going to go back to the way it was. Sadly, and then not sadly. Some of the clubs are gone, but at the same time, some of the people who were just a pain in the what to work with or deal with are gone. Yeah, it's so important, and I see in my students, it's just a different time. It's a different animal. There's sophistication in them at such a very young age. I'm laughing because the things that these kids come with. I think about the way I was as a freshman in college, and they're just so worldly and knowledgeable and connected to movement and change and artistry on such a high level, and they are invested in ways that I don't think that I was at their age. Music was fun, and yes, it's fun for them, but they're saying something at the same time, and I don't think that I was that student. I was having fun. I was excited about performing and being exposed to a lot of things, but most students want to say something while they're performing and having fun. They want it to mean something more than just look at me, and I think that's super exciting. That is a huge shift in just philosophy of the college student in 2020. And many of the students that I'm talking about too. I know you do, and you taught several of the students that I'm talking about as well, and helped to encourage and add to their bag and not change them, and give them a platform in which they can convey what they want to convey. Yeah, it's been super fun. It's been super fun to watch these students do that. That was a complete shift right back to school. I didn't mean to do.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, it ties in this like having a younger mentor kind of a thing. I mean, I mean, we probably have had those, even though we didn't call them that. You know what I mean? That idea, being a teacher is a very two-way street, much more than I think. I don't know that anybody would like that anybody's putting on the poster or whatever, or putting in the pamphlet.
Absolutely. Well, and you've heard me say this too. I'm sure when we're looking for students to come join a program, we're looking for family members, and they're looking for a family. And I don't really mean that just colloquially or casually. I mean, the truth is, we want people that are going to generate something that's going to make us think, that's going to make us better, that's going to add to, that's going to accentuate, that might be tough too. But I think that that's really, really, really important, and I stand by that. I really do. I want to learn something from the people I'm spending so much time with. I'm hoping they're coming to find a school that they're going to learn all their skill sets so they can build their artistry and their aesthetic. But we need to benefit. We need to grow. Yeah, absolutely true. I didn't need to say all that because you said it way more eloquently than I just did. But
I will never agree with a statement like that. Everything in my head always sounds like blah, 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 blah. And then I like smile, and then people are like, wow, okay. I'll say some stuff now. Wrapping up, for this channel that that I'm working on is focused on, I think really focused on learning, like that's kind of why we're here doing this. So what's, maybe quickly, what's something that you've learned recently that you're excited about?
I've learned recently that empathy is not sacrificing anything in any situation. Being empathetic, coming to the student, coming to whoever at the supermarket or at the gas station or at the restaurant or whatever, empathy is not a sacrifice. I'm not going to lose anything by being empathetic. And I guess specifically when we're talking about academics and school and the pandemic, and the situation that we're all finding ourselves in, and the rather strange and unusual circumstances we've all had to work under for the last 9 weeks or so, that empathy is always the best go-to in this situation. And I think that before the pandemic, I think I was a little more of a hard line on, you will be here, you will do this, you will show up, you will have A to C learned, you will know it. And yes, am I still assigning those things? Yes. Are still students still coming with those things? They certainly are. But I am way more understanding that my role in the classroom is more about the mental and emotional health of these students first than it is the musical. The musical stuff is coming just because the empathy is there, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And so that's been a very recent and real thing. Um, the students are thriving even amidst all of this craziness, and it's tense. You know, I said at the beginning, everything's going really, really, really well, and it is. But on a day-to-day basis, every single one of the people that are in this program that I get the privilege to lead are dealing with a lot of things, and being very aware of that on a almost hour-to-hour basis has, I think, been the reason for the success of our semester so far. Empathy. Let's lift each other up. Let's find ways to help each other succeed. And sometimes it means giving a little bit more, but we'll get the return later. That's what I found of late. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun.